Jedan od pionira transpersonalne psihologije, slavni Stanislav Grof, danas već u godinama, davno je istraživao granice svijesti i vrata ljudske percepcije. Još u ono vrijeme dok je danas zabranjeni LSD bio tek zanimljiva laboratorijska novotarija. Nije mimo išao niti šamanske tradicije, razne biljke ili druga vozila za stanje transa koje čovjeku omogućuje razne transformacije ili rješavanje problema. Nakon svega toga otkrio je kako čovjeku ne trebaju pomagači za otvaranje tih kanala, da osnovni alati onako svi stalno rabimo. Disanje. Svoju je metodu nazvao holotropsko disanje. I evo je danas ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Sve vas pozdravljam. Nienke Merbis i Farell stižu iz organizacije Grof Transpersonal Training, odnosno Grofov transpersonalni trening, jedina organizacija u svijetu koja trenira i izdaje certifikat za facilitatore holotropskog disanja. Nienke i su veterani sa skoro 20 godina iskustva. Dobar dan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ključno pitanje jest za sam početak, što to holotropsko disanje jest?
Are you going to answer that one? Okay. Holotropic breathwork is a method for self-exploration. People who are in search of finding out more about themselves. And it is a non-directive way of going inside yourself, finding your own inner healer wisdom that we all have. And it's finding access to that wisdom that we give in holotropic breathwork, give an opportunity to people in a workshop environment for people to go inside themselves and search for answers inside themselves and do it in a safe containment. That's why we are facilitators, to keep the environment safe for the people to do their own work. We are not directing, but we keep them in a safe environment and encourage them to go wherever they need to go.
Što uopće znači riječ holotropsko?
The word holotropic comes from Greek and means moving towards wholeness. And there is a difference between the holotropic states and the hylotropic states, which is what we are doing right now. And the holotropic state is where you go into an altered state. And in holotropic breathwork, the intention is to go for your own healing.
Ispričajte nam nešto o povijesti holotropskog disanja. Tko ga je izmislio, kako i zašto?
Okay, the history is actually quite complex because Stan Grof is a psychiatrist who was working in Czechoslovakia and working with patients who were suffering from psychosis. And he was sent a sample of LSD from the Sandoz laboratory in Switzerland as a way of helping his nurses to understand the psychotic state. But Stan, being Stan, took it himself and had many, many experiences from which he began to see that there were patterns emerging. He continued that research. Yes, well, he moved to America and continued his research in Maryland, I believe. And but then when LSD was banned, he and his wife Christina had to look for another way of accessing non-ordinary states of consciousness. And they looked at traditional cultures because they were aware that in traditional cultures, some traditional cultures, they used non-ordinary states for the health of the community. Not only for the individual, but also for the community, looking for answers to questions on behalf of the community, looking for healing within their communities. So, and they discovered that they used dancing, drumming, chanting, and meditative techniques that use breath and different patterns of breathing. So they discovered, and music, rhythm in particular. So they decided they would work with breathing and very carefully chosen music to rhythmic music in particular, to see if that enabled people to access non-ordinary states of consciousness, and yes, it does. So it's a very simple process. There are no substances used, just our own breath and music.
And a safe containment.
And a very safe container.
Yeah.
It is done in groups, as it would be in traditional communities. It would be done in the group. And this work is carried out in the safe container of a group and with facilitation.
Može li se, znači, reći da holotropsko disanje potiče od tih, nazovimo ih, šamanskih rituala?
There are links in that both shamanic rituals and holotropic breathwork are used to induce non-ordinary states of consciousness, yes, to access the main dimensions, if you like, of reality that we don't normally have. This is a consensual reality. We agree that I'm sitting on a chair, but if you think about quantum physicists, they would not. They see more than the metal of this chair. They see the energy, either as a particle or a wave, that actually constitutes the metal. Is the consistency of it constitutes the metal of this chair. So it gives us access to different ways of perceiving ourselves in the world. I don't know whether that answers your question, does it?
Je, odgovorili ste ga. Kada pričamo o holotropskom disanju, možete li ukratko opisati ono što se zbiva u dugo, to jest tijekom više sati? Kako to izgleda i što osobe doživljavaju, u kojem opsegu?
There is a whole range of experiences. And from the outside, it's very difficult as a facilitator to see what is going on for a person. People can have huge emotional catharsis. Mm-hmm. A person can cry for hours. And you think what you want to do is hold that person. And in the end, when they report in the sharing groups, they say, no, I was not crying for grief. I was crying for joy. And it's hard to see that from the outside. So as a facilitator, you've asked to be invited in a person's process. And then you support as much as you can, and you stay with this person for as long as needed. But from the outside, we don't know what's going on for that person. And you follow what's happening for that person, and you wait till you're being informed what's going on. It can also be a whole range of different experiences. It doesn't need to be one experience. It can be a person goes into a past life and comes out into consensus reality, looks around the room and think, am I ready? Maybe I take a little bit more time, and goes back, closes eyes, keeps on breathing, and maybe has another totally different experience that's more physical or biographical. There is no way of guessing. It is a huge range of, I think, experience that every human being on the planet can have and that we have access to. And that is very interesting, and Stan is very curious about the human psyche, and that is very inspiring.
U svibnju 2010. održana je prva radionica holotropskog disanja u Hrvatskoj. Opišite nam kako to izgleda, dakle, izvana, ne iz unutarnjeg svijeta. Ljudi sjede, leže, slušaju glazbu, dišu. Je li ta tehnika disanja nešto posebno ili je nešto što je svima blisko?
It is special in the way that we invite people to lie down on the mat, close their eyes, and use through relaxation, and in that relaxation we invite them to be as open to their own inner healing wisdom as they can be, to have no agendas, to have no expectations, just be open, like we often say, the beginner's mind in Zen. And what it looks like from the outside, if an outsider would walk in the room, you would see a lot of people lying on mats. Every person, every breeder, we call them, has a sitter to keep the environment safe. Sometimes people start to move, and you make sure that they are on their mat, close to their mat. And they can move a lot sometimes to release a lot of physical tension or to dance their joy, and that's fine. It becomes a field of beautiful inner work where you are a witness and an observer of other people's journeys.
Kakva je muzika posrijedi, odnosno da li jest to uopće muzika u klasičnom smislu riječi ili je više temeljena na ponavljajućim obrascima ritma?
It is in the beginning. We have different stages in the music. The first hour is very encouraging and rhythmic to keep breathing, as a support of finding their own inner breathing rhythm. The second hour I call it's more journey music. They explore, and the third hour is more calling back music, grounding music, softer music, meditative music. So there is a whole range of music that we use. We try not to use words because that's distracting for people. We love to use ethnic music. If we can find it, we definitely use it. We love that. It's a whole art to create 3 hours of music, and some are very good at it, and it's beautiful to listen to in itself. So it is certainly a help for people to use the music as an accompaniment on their journey.
Yeah, can I add that to that? That it isn't about listening to the note, individual notes of the music. It's about allowing the music to help you move through that particular journey on that particular day. Because what happens is our own psyche brings what we need at that particular time, and the music is an accompaniment to that particular journey. And each individual breather, even though they're listening to the same music, will actually have an individual, unique journey, even though the music is the same, which is amazing.
Vi se već skoro 20 godina bavite holotropskim disanjem, po prilici toliko ono i staro. Sjećate li se vašeg prvog susreta sa holotropskim disanjem i kakav je imalo efekt na vas?
I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also a foster parent. So I with my husband, look after children whose own parents can't manage to do that. And we had 2 foster children at the time, and this foster child was really pressing all my buttons. I was being triggered by this foster child, so I went for my own therapy. And my therapist suggested that I might like to try working with holotropic breathwork. So my first experience was really around anger. I had discovered that I was angry. And I had no idea. I'd never been angry before in my life. And I had no sense that I had any angry energy within me at all. So my very first breath work, I was very nervous, as I am a little bit tonight. And but I was open. I was ready. I was ready to explore myself. I was also searching, I think, for something, for a sense of meaning. So that these 2 things were going on at the same time. The anger that was emerging in me that frightened me, that surprised me and frightened me, and also my own search for a sense of meaning, a sense of who I am. So I went for my first breath work. And once it started and I started to breathe and emotions started to emerge, and I found that I was connecting with myself in a very different way. I had never really connected with myself before. And I realised this was the piece that was missing from my work as a therapist and also from myself and my connection with myself. So it was both personal and professional. So for me, it was the most amazing experience of my life. I thought, I was quite scared. But at the same time, I came out of it having worked through some, I think, probably very deep trauma, fear, which is still there, but I'm more trusting. But that was my very first experience was really, it opened my heart, basically.
Kada pričamo o onim traumama koje nosimo, a da nismo ni svjesni, transpersonalna psihologija je područje koje omogućava da se nađu poveznice između trauma i događaja koji čak ne pripadaju ovom životu, barem se takvima pokazuju u našem sjećanju. Od kada sve možemo vući razne traume i kakve vrste traume? Iznenađujuće zvuči podatak da ponekad sam čin rođenja nas može obilježiti za cijeli život. A da ne pričamo o stvarima kojih se ni ne sjećamo. Kakav je to raspon osjećaj, od kuda oni stižu i u kojoj mjeri mogu biti sakriveni u nama?
It's a huge part in the theory of holotropic breathwork. I think Stan was one of the very first, not totally the first, but certainly one who takes it very deep and very far, that birth has potential, a couple of stages where there is birth trauma. If a person is being in the womb and the womb is not safe and not good, that has an imprint. And the imprint can act itself out in not feeling welcome in the world, feelings of not belonging in this world. If you come from a womb that is safe and healthy and joyful, it opens a total different door for the child to come in the world and feeling welcomed and feeling safe and feeling supported. And the next stage in the birth is that the cervix is still closed and the birth process has started and there could be feelings of being trapped. And that can work its way in a totally different way out in the world again, as also the third stage where the cervix is open and the birth has started and come out of the birth canal. The fourth matrix is rebirth, coming out in the world. And there can be huge trauma can be linked to it. Also the way how is a child being received in the world. Sometimes there is a medical intervention immediately after birth. And again, that has its mark on the psyche and can work its way out in later life.
I can talk about the medical intervention
immediately
after my birth. It was quite a difficult birth, but it was very rapid. And I was a blue baby. I couldn't breathe. They cut the cord. They wanted to intubate me and to get me breathing, but they cut the cord too fast and too short. So that it was really traumatic for me. And that did have quite an impact on me. So that I had come out, I had the experience of release from the struggle. So there was that kind of elated feeling of release, and then it was cut short. And what happens for me, there's a pattern in my life where I would go through quite a struggle and I will come through it, and then almost immediately afterwards there will be something to take that joy, if you like, and that release away from me. And in the past, so I now understand that that's my process through breathwork, holotropic breathwork. This is actually my process. There's a pattern in my life, and in the past that hard slap, if you like, immediately afterwards would have devastated me and I would have disintegrated. Now I can say, oh, okay, it's my process, and I can just accept it and get on with my life.
Završava li proces ikada?
No. I think it's ongoing. I think it will be with me until I die. The final separation, if you like, because that's another huge imprinting, the actual separation and how it happens. My final separation may be the end of that process. I do not know. But what it does mean, although that coex is called a condensed set of experiences, although that doesn't stop, I can manage it very relatively easily because I know I'm aware of it. So I can change my reaction. The process doesn't change, but my reaction and response changes to it, so that I can live my life more fully, with less fear of the harm that I'm going to get when I come through something.
Yeah, and I also would like to add that in this whole matrices, they are also like a door opening into other realms, the realm of the transpersonal. You can step into the transpersonal and really becoming one with the universe, or really understanding what it means to be a tree, or really to know, like being a Buddhist, a Christian having a Buddhist experience, a Hindu having a Sufi experience. All those realms open up. And I think often through trauma you have no idea how it works, but I think it is also an opening, a door opening into another realm. And that is what is welcome in breathwork. It's totally a welcoming, go for it, follow it.
Yes.
Evo, često spominjete Stena, pa ću ja još jednom spomenuti da se Sten punim imenom zove Stanislav Grof i uostalom organizacija s koje stižete je Grofov transpersonalni trening. Možda bi mogli koju minutu potrošiti na pojam transpersonalne psihologije. Kada je nastala, kako i zašto i kakvu ulogu Stanislav Grof imao u njoj i još uvijek ima?
Stan was one of the founders of the transpersonal psychology, and he worked closely with Maslow and still is very much involved in this whole... He has an immensely curious mind and is really... it's wonderful to be with him because everything is intriguing for him. So he has an immense interest in the psyche of the human mind. He has run several conferences around the world, the ITA, International, what does it stand for? Transpersonal conferences. In Europe, in South America, in different places in America. And invites people over who have this open view of science, psychology, religion, you name it. And there will be someone there representing that field. And I think if some word represents for Stan, it's a huge big heart and a very open mind.
Usudio bi se reći da tu ima još i toliko više od toga što riječi ne mogu opisati. U hrvatskom tisku, u časopisu Svjetlost je godinama izlazila kolumna sa iskustvima Stanislava Grofa. Kad se priča o psihijatriji, psihologiji, konferencijama, to sve zvuči tako službeno. Međutim, te kolumne su otkrivale ogromne količine njegovih priča, njegovih iskustava, putovanja po svijetu, u Australiji, među Indijancima. Situacije koje skoro da čovjek ne može povjerovati. Situacije u kojima Indijanci doista plešu ples kiše i da bi kiša počela padati na tom mjestu u pustinji, što daleko nadilazi nešto što mi na zapadu prihvaćamo. Međutim, očigledno je da kod transpersonalne psihologije svijest postaje alat kojim se bukvalno može mijenjati vanjski svijet. Ima li kakvih priča koje bi išli u prilog tome? Da li je to zaista tako?
Like I said as well, just a few minutes ago, it can be a Buddhist having a Hindu experience. It can also be someone... there is someone who went through the training and she lives in Australia. She had no idea about her background. Through the breath work, she discovered that she had Aboriginal ancestors. Her mother was Aboriginal. She was given up for adoption. And in her breath work, she had experiences that she later found out her grandmother had those experiences. And much later, they were verified because she went in search. Who were my parents? And through her mother, she met this grandmother. And this whole reality opened up. There was another woman who had an experience in the breathwork way before she was born. And it was in a battlefield, and it happened in the First World War. And she checked it with her parents. And her father really was shocked and said, "This was my father's experience. How do you know?" And it was so detailed that it was like the colors that were around him, the clothes a friend was wearing, the environment where they were in the field. And she had it all correctly. So it's really interesting how we can tap into a much wider field than we think we can in Western thinking. And that field is fascinating.
And I can give an experience of my own. I was experiencing a death experience. I was dying. I was a young boy. In my experience on the mattress, I was a young boy, and I was dying. And after I died, I felt this huge, in my experience, I felt this blow here on my head, my forehead. And that was it. I was gone into some other experience that wasn't very clear to me. And I had no idea that there was a practice of hitting the forehead of a dead person to release the soul. I had no idea that there was a practice like that. So I was really quite shocked by that experience. It's way beyond my, I came from England, I live in Ireland. It's way beyond my experience. So yes, we're well able to, it happens a lot.
Činjenica jest da u današnje vrijeme postoje znanstvenici čije istraživanja podržavaju indicije da zaista svijest dolazi od prije života i nastavlja se poslije. Najpoznatiji je Jan Stevenson koji je putem mladeža djece istraživao da li su neki ljudi doživjeli točno one nesreće kojih se ta djeca sjećala. Naravno, mladeži su bili nekakvi svjedoci, pamćenja i slično. On je napravio ogromne studije sa time. Međutim, tu se radilo uglavnom o konkretnim pričama i iskustvima. U kojoj mjeri kroz izmijenjena stanja svijesti se čovjek susreće sa simbolima koje treba odgonetnuti? S obzirom da vrlo često čovjek svoje probleme, traume može doživljavati u izmijenjenim stanjima svijesti u nekakvom simboličkom obliku. S obzirom da mnoge probleme je teško vizualizirati. Neko može se razmišljati o svom egu ili nečem što će se prikazati kao nešto drugo, ne može se prikazati kao stolac. Na koji način, da li ima takvih simboličkih susreta?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm trying to, yes, I have. I recall very early, this is a very early breathwork, where I was experiencing again, a culture that I have no knowledge of, had no knowledge of at all. I was experiencing myself being taken into a temple, and there were symbols on the walls, symbols I had never seen before. And later, when I came out of the experience, I was able to go and look up these symbols, and they do exist. I don't know where the temple is, but the symbols exist. It's way beyond my experience.
Jeste li vi imali slična iskustva?
No, not similar as Jean's. I've had more experiences of being in other realms. I remember being in an environment that I cannot match with anything that happened on the planet. So my feeling is I was in another world, I was in another planet, I don't know. I also learned not to pay too much attention to that otherness. I really, in the beginning, it's very exciting and I'm really intrigued. But I also started to realize through help of the facilitators, yes, but what does that mean for your day-to-day life?
Znači, to nije turističko putovanje.
No.
Exactly. It's not a tourist trip. We always encourage people to bring it back to the life that's happening right now. What is happening for the life in this moment? Why could this session be important? And sometimes they get immediately, it's because X, Y, Z. And sometimes it takes time. And you take the experience home and you talk about it with your therapist or with a good friend or whoever you feel close to. And maybe much later you start to realize, that happened then on the mat. And now I start to understand what the meaning is about. And that's very liberating. And also it's freeing your own truth up. It's freeing up who you are, and that is a great feeling. And it's wonderful when that happens.
That's right. For example, with the symbols that I discovered, when I looked them up, it was about me working with those and saying, what does that symbol mean for me now in my life? And then working with that, working with whatever understanding came for me from that.
Doktor Stanislav Grof, doktor psihijatrije, naravno, čuli smo već, došao iz Čehoslovačke, tadašnje u Ameriku još u vrijeme dok je željezna zavjesa dijelila Europu na dva dijela. Drugim riječima, riječ je o čovjeku koji je na klasični način obrazovan i na taj klasični način se naravno i istražuje probleme. Međutim, kod ovakvih slučajeva tu se gubi granica između subjektivnog i objektivnog i stvari se mijenjaju. Kako suvremena psihijatrija gleda na holotropsko disanje i na Grofov transpersonalni trening? Imamo čovjeka koji je danas već i u godinama iskusan i koji za sebe ostavio veliko djelo. S druge strane, tu se pojavljuju pojmovi koje današnja suvremena nekakva paradigma čak i ignorira ili smatra da nisu točni ili smatra da pripadaju nekim istočnim tradicijama ili nekim drugim, uopće nije bitno. Međutim, kako se unutar psihijatrijske znanosti gleda na transpersonalni trening i na holotropsko disanje? Je li prihvaćeno, neprihvaćeno, da li se o tome šuti, da li ga se preporuča, istražuje?
It totally depends on the psychiatrist who is there at the other end of this and who is maybe open-minded enough. We have seen many psychiatrists coming through the training.
Yes.
And I remember one saying, how did she say it? She said, I learned anything and everything about being human. And here I learned how to be a human.
Yes.
So that's that difference. And if people are open for that, a psychiatrist or a therapist is open to have those experiences, then there is no problem. And it can easily be fitted into the traditional way of thinking about the psyche. But of course, there are other people who will say, no, I don't want to go there, or it's too threatening, or it's just a no-no. It's no-no land. That's fine. It will happen eventually, or it will never happen. In the meantime, for Stan, the most important part is that it is a way of healing the psyche, and he has seen the results of it. And also, there are other psychiatrists in the world and therapists in the world who are seeing the benefits of the world. So they do it, and they work with it, and that's good enough.
Can I add something to that? Which is that some psychiatrists are very concerned, in a sense, that their own status, their own power may well be usurped, because the whole point of this work is it is an inner healer, that the breather themselves is doing the work. It's not coming from outside. There's no one else outside them healing them. They are healing themselves, and they are understanding themselves. They are finding themselves. So it comes from within. It's about empowerment. And traditional psychiatry is from the outside, and the psychiatrist holds a lot of power.
Yeah.
So it can be very threatening. I think you're right. It can be very, very threatening to traditional psychiatry.
Dobro, čini mi se da je velika snaga holotropskog disanja u tome što se koristi isključivo disanjem. Naime, poznato je da su mnoge biljke koje rastu oko nas po livadama, šumama, na svim kontinentima u stvari neke vrsti izmjenjivača stanja svijesti. Mnogi s time eksperimentiraju, mnogi to istražuju, neke od njih su prepoznate pa čak su izvan zakona, što neki komentiraju pomalo da je neprirodno staviti prirodu izvan zakona i slično. Međutim, čini se da nitko ne može holotropskom disanju koje se bavi izmijenjenim stanjima svijesti pripisati išta što bi moglo biti u bilo kakvom, kao što recimo LSD bio 60-ih, sukobu sa zakonom, s obzirom da svi dišemo, pa čini se da jednako disanje.
We breathe. We breathe.
We breathe, we use music, and we keep a safe container.
Yes.
That's also hugely important, I think.
Yes.
Because everyone who is experimenting with drugs and LSD and whatever is on the market nowadays, they take it without a safety. I think the only intention that breathwork is being used is to find their own inner healing wisdom. And that's a huge difference from being a tourist in those realms.
Yes.
That is the intention, to find that inner wisdom. And the way we are running these workshops is within that safety. We keep the safe place for the whole duration of the workshop. Not only the 3 hours on the mat, but also after that. And during that whole weekend. And if there is need for aftercare afterwards, that's also available. So it doesn't stop. And I think that's a huge difference with other uses of going, other ways of going into non-ordinary states.
Kad govorite o unutrašnjoj iscijeliteljskoj mudrosti, neki ljudi su rekli već dosta davno da zdravlje zapravo je obrazovanje i često puta ako čovjek ustanovi uzrok problema, čak se može dogoditi da on preko noći nestane. Naravno, uzroci su smotani, zabijeni, složeni i teško je do njih doći. Međutim, često puta se govori o inteligenciji tijela koje samo prepoznaje što je za njega dobro i što ne. Taj unutrašnji iscijelitelj i ta unutrašnja iscijeliteljska mudrost, mogu li oni utjecati i na bolesti koje nisu vezane uz psihu, koje ulaze u psihijatrske kartone, na fizičke bolesti?
Well, there is a theory that physical maladies are manifestations of an inner unease, if you like, dis-ease. If we are uneasy in our bodies, then it will manifest. If we're uneasy, if our psyche is uneasy, if we are disturbed in any way, it manifests somehow. And so, there is a theory that everything is process, that everything is a manifestation, an external manifestation of an inner disturbance. So, I've forgotten the question now.
Postoje li iskustva gdje su ljudi putem holotropskog disanja uklanjali neke uzroke koji su se manifestirali kao fizičke bolesti?
Yes, absolutely. We have seen. We both have seen examples.
Možete dati nekoliko primjera?
Yeah, sure. We would. I remember a woman coming to our workshops in Ireland who had cancer, and the way she was working with it, she was really going deep into a lot of physical trauma, also emotional trauma. And it worked. And it was beautiful to watch. But I think it might not necessarily be the panacea for every illness that's on the planet. I think for other people it can also be getting access to the knowledge that we all die and coming to terms with it. Yes. And going into that process of, my life is ending, and going through the grieving, through the anger, and going to many, many workshops after that, coming to peace with, this is my time, this was my time on the planet, and I'm ready to go now. That's beautiful to watch as well. That's incredibly powerful and has a huge ripple effect on everyone who is witnessing that. Their families, but also us as facilitators. Even when they come once a month or once every half year, it's that keeps me going, because it's so beautiful to watch and it's so real. It's so real, and I love that. Yeah.
And I can give an example of a client of mine who suffered very severe migraine. And I suggested that she might do breath work to see what emerges for her. And, she discovered really blocked anger, energy in her body. She was clumping her jaw. There is a nerve that goes from the jaw, and that was creating her migraine. Once she learned that it was okay to express her anger, her rage, it was rage, then she no longer has migraine.
Drugim riječima, u trenutku kada se problem osvijesti, već ga 99% riješeno, tako često ispada. Često puta ona poslovica koju se svi držimo, no pain, no gain, bez muke nema nauke, se pokaže kao da nije baš potpuno točna. Pričate o dosta jasnim slikama, dakle vizijama, pa čak i pričama iskustava iz vremena rođenja, prošlog života. Na koji način i u kojoj mjeri se one zaista vide? S obzirom da nisam imao nikad takvo iskustvo, pa mi je uopće teško zamisliti ove priče u kojima je to tako stvarno. Da li su oči zatvorene, da li se odvijaju priče u segmentima, da li čovjek odjednom percipira holografski cijelu priču od početka do kraja? Na koji način, ako se može uopće takav doživljaj, koji naravno izmiče riječima, donekle približiti riječima gledateljima?
I often, sometimes you can see it in a person in the movements they make. If they become like an animal, an angry tiger, you can guess, more or less, that this is an angry person, and there must be something in there that is a tiger, or lion, or really roaring with anger. And if you experience from the inside, like you're saying, I don't have those experiences, but maybe as a child, when you remember where you were reading a book that you were totally involved in, and your mother was calling you and said, you have to come and you have to do the dishes. You were doing the dishes, but you were half in the book. You were not completely out. You were just, your mind was running with this book and these images, and that's how you can compare. You have those images in you when you are having experience on the mat. That's how I compare it. I think nearly every person on the planet will know it. When you are a musician and you play music, you are in another realm. When you're walking, for example, or when you are really active as an athlete, you can have images and experiences, physically experiences that are not ordinary, that are definitely in the realm of non-ordinary. And it is hard, again, from the outside to see what is happening for a person, but sometimes you can guess, and sometimes...
Ja sam zapravo pitao kako je čovjek iznutra koji to gleda.
About the breather.
Inside,
okay. It's an inner process. The breather, we lie on the mat with our eyes closed. It is an inner experience. So some people, not everybody has images.
Yeah, that's true.
You can just have an experience, maybe a very physical experience, and a sort of knowing, which is very difficult to describe, a sort of knowing about that experience and about yourself in it. Or you may have an image, but not everybody has images. Both those experiences are equally valuable. There's no hierarchy of experience. But, some people have images, some people don't. But it's an inner experience. Your eyes are closed.
In the beginning of my breathworks, I often was icy cold. And I had no images, nothing. I was only so cold and I couldn't warm up. And that was the experience I needed to have at that moment. And it really taught me a lot later, much later, because I was first totally stuck in that physical experience. And later I started to realize, this is something explaining about my early days on this planet. There was no one to catch me, no one to hold me. Okay, and that helped me. As soon as I realized what the meaning was of these sessions, those experiences changed. Yes. I have never had that icy cold feeling ever again.
Ponekad takva iskustva u stvari imaju kvalitetu mita, a mit, znamo, prenosi poruku, ali likovi i priča se mijenjaju, međutim poruka ostaje nepromijenjena. Mnogi istraživači poput Raymonda Moodya ustanovili su da neki slučajevi, primjerice iskustava reinkarnacije, se mogu potvrditi. Primjerice, može čovjek otići na neko mjesto i potražiti dokument o čovjeku kojeg se prisjetio. Neka možda ne mogu, ali svejedno djeluju terapeutski, kao da se neka situacija možda oblikuje u neku priču koja funkcionira. I to je moguće postići na razne načine. Često puta su se spominjane piljenja u jezera, u vode, u ravne površine, čak i u kugle. Drugim riječima, važno je simboličko značenje takvih događaja za osobu, puno više nego pitati se da li se ovo što sad doživljavam zaista nekad dogodilo ili nije.
Definitely. The symbolic meaning takes you wherever you need to go. Especially with past lives, it can be very tempting to use that as an ego inflation. Oh, I was a princess in past Egypt. Aha!
Zanimljivo je što su uvijek svi bili princeze, Napoleoni ili nešto slično. Nitko nije bio radnik, seljak na polju.
Exactly. And that is so interesting, and that's, I think, it's so important to talk about the experiences, because the way we facilitate that is bringing it back to this life, in the here and now. What is the meaning of that experience that you had as a princess in Egypt on the mat? If you were a princess or not is not important.
Koja je priča iza toga? Kada pričamo danas o Groffovom transpersonalnom treningu, gdje se on sve odvija? Znamo da mu je centar u Americi, vi ste na neki način djelujete i u Europi. Evo sad ste konačno stigli, zahvaljujući nekim ljudima koji su bili zainteresirani ovdje u Hrvatsku, i neke su radionice već bile, neke će još biti. U kojoj mjeri i koliko ima holotropskih radionica po svijetu, ili da kažem centara, ili kako to već ide?
Oh, I don't know how many. The training. Okay, for the training, I know. Okay, let's talk about the training. There is two trainings in Europe at the moment. One is in Spain and one is in England. There is a training in America. There's a training in, as far as I know, in Australia. South America. There's definitely a training in Australia. And whoever is willing to pick up the ball and run with it, we are interested to see if it will work to run a training, and GTT will decide on that. At the moment, I've traveled a lot in my life, and I'm very interested in going many countries. So for us to be in Croatia was a real adventure and wonderful to see what is going to happen here and how we can support the process that is coming up here in whatever way we can be of service.
Kako se postaje inače facilitator? Odnosno, prije ili kasnije će možda i u Hrvatskoj postojati neki facilitator koji je priučen ili naučen.
That would be great.
That would be great.
That would be great.
Kako se to postaje?
It is a 2-year process. You need to have a couple of breathworks under your belt before you can enter the training. Some people don't have that opportunity, and they can come into training without having breathed ever before. It is definitely the start is to do it for personal growth, to find out about yourself, who you are, what are your issues, what are the things you need to work on. So it's very experiential. Then there are certain topics that we give, and one is psychopathology, death and dying. There are 4 mandatory modules people need to take.
Spiritual emergency.
Spiritual emergency. Addiction.
Addiction
is a powerful one.
Powerful.
It's a really good one. Yeah. And there are 3 mandatory. So a person can choose what they want to do. But we really encourage people to take those 2 years, 2.5 years mostly, to do their own inner work as well. Sometimes with therapy at home, and sometimes other works of working.
Because it's important to integrate those experiences.
Exactly.
It's not just about lying on a mat having an experience. It's about how do we take this into our ordinary everyday lives. Because that's where we live.
And then they apprentice with certified facilitators at workshops to get the feel how to run these workshops. So it is quite a lengthy process. On the other hand, it's not that long, because you can take your time. You don't need to do it in a certain time frame. If you want to take 3 years,
you
fine.
Do it.
Hvala Nienke, hvala Jean. Nadam se da ćemo se opet vidjeti u Hrvatskoj. Hvala i vama na pažnji. Vidite, to vam je život. Kad sve pročitate o kemijskim spojevima, velikim bitkama u povijesti, građi kostiju, pa onda razne filozofske traktate o bitku ili umjetnosti, onda ostaje neodgovoreno tek šačica pitanja, poput tko sam, kamo idem, otkud stižem, zašto sam ovdje. Nažalost, tih par pitanja tiču se skoro svakog trenutka, svakog dana našeg cijelog života. A odgovor nigdje ne piše, pa ga moramo potražiti na onom istom mjestu od kuda je stiglo i pitanje. Ispostavi se da su onaj ko pita i onaj ko odgovara zapravo ista osoba. Samo što te osobe, čini se, rijetko razgovaraju. I kad na kraju saznate da je naša temeljna aktivnost, odnosno disanje, sve što je potrebno da zaronite u te skrivene spilje samog sebe, čovjeku dođe da se zaista zapita tko sam, kamo idem, otkuda stižem i zašto sam ovdje. Doviđenja.